Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our webinar on reality charting tips and tricks. Today we're going to walk you through some of the features in the software that can help you more effectively build your reality chart. Our next webinar after this is going to be on Thursday, September 5th, and we'll cover more helpful features that come into play after you have created your reality chart. In that webinar, we're also going to give you a preview of RC Pro Enterprise, which is the latest release from Apollo RCA and Reality Charting. And it utilizes the reality charting approach that you're familiar with or that you're going to see today with the addition of database-backed features. For instance, it allows for all RCAs to be stored on one central location. It also shows real-time graphs of action item and solution progress reports. You can search for systemic causes or past RCAs on similar incidents. And you can share and collaborate on charts with colleagues and managers within the database setup. So I think that's going to be interesting for a lot of folks, so please stay tuned for that webinar invitation over the next week or so. Before I hand it over to our presenter today, I just want to give a super quick introduction on who we are for those of you who may be less familiar with ARMS. ARMS Reliability is an authorized global training provider of the Apollo root cause analysis methodology, and we have over 15 certified trainers from various backgrounds located around the world. We provide a range of RCA training courses to suit different roles and levels of involvement in RCA, including participants, facilitators, master facilitators, and managers courses. We also provide facilitation or investigation services for clients who have a tricky investigation or a significant recurring problem they need to solve where an outside expert can help. And we also provide workshops and annual audits to review or reinvigorate your RCA program. For more information or to view our course outlines or our public training schedule, you can check out apollorootcause.com. ARMS Reliability also provides services, software, and training to help clients optimize the reliability of their assets. So if you're interested in that line of things, you can learn more at armsreliability.com. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. You should each have a control panel on your screen. Mine's over on the right side here, and you're going to find a questions panel there. We're hoping today's webinar is going to be pretty interactive, so we want to encourage you to type questions to us throughout the presentation today, and we'll answer some of those as we go along and also at the end of the presentation. So just keep in mind if your question doesn't happen to get answered during the live webinar, I will be saving a list of all the questions, so at the end, Kevin can reply to you directly if you didn't get your question answered today. So. Just before we get started, the last thing we want to do, we just want to do a quick poll. We want to find out everyone's experience level with reality charting. That way Kevin can sort of tailor today's presentation and sort of try to address everyone's needs here. So I'm just going to launch this poll. Okay, so everyone should see the question on your screen. I'll just give you a few seconds to make your selection here. Just got a bunch of answers coming in, which is great. Most of you have voted. Go ahead and close that and share the results. Okay. So about a third of us haven't used reality charting before, another third, use it a little bit, and, the rest sort of average users or high users. So that's good. It'll be a little bit of an introduction for everyone today and kind of learn a few skills or features that maybe you're not using at the moment. So that's great. So what I'm going to do now is just change the presenter over to Kevin. And just an introduction for Kevin. He's our lead root cause analysis instructor and facilitator. He's an experienced educator and maintenance and reliability professional with over 33 years spent working in a variety of roles for Alcoa Primary Metals Group. In his last role prior to joining ARMS Reliability, Kevin was a certified Apollo instructor, teaching over 500 classes across the Alcoa group of companies. He's going to give us a lot of valuable information today on how to make the most of reality charting when you're in the process of building your reality chart. So now I'll just hand it over to Kevin.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. Hopefully give a chance to show a little bit about the software, etc. Wanted to break it into a couple of little smaller sections so that everybody would have a chance to see small portions rather than big chunks. So hopefully we're going to talk about items that are associated with building a chart this time, and then some more of the management or reporting details in the next one. So I will go through some just generally how you move things around, not too many things about the problem definition, etc. But in general, please feel free to put some questions together as you go, and if we're talking about a specific item, it'll probably be more appropriate to try to answer that at that time. So send your questions to Susan, and she'll pass them on to me. So first order of business before we get started any further is I want to point out, in case you haven't seen this, I want to make sure everybody knows that this exists. And that's this report feedback section. It will pop up here, and I'll show you. The reason I want you to see that is when you use the software, some good ideas may pop up. I want to make sure you feed that back, so you put those in here, and that will go to the software developer. They will then prioritize, and you have the opportunity to make some improvements. Usually in my classes, there's a good idea or two that comes up, and so if you have those, please make sure they get into the system so we can continually improve the software. We'll get out of that. Go back to the chart. The other thing I want to mention is that recognize that the software is designed to be I'll say a partner with the process, meaning you don't use the software to just do the RCA. You have to follow the process and some of the details that go with it. If you want to call it more of a reporting tool or a recording tool, some people have tried to just use the software and do the RCA process, but usually come back and say it didn't work so well. That's because they haven't had the training. So be aware that the software is more of a match to the process and helps you get through that process. Okay, going to start out by just showing you some general things. I've got some items up on the screen. I've got some other things we'll talk about, but just generally how you move things around and add things. The first order of business would be to talk about how you define the reality charting. So as you notice, I went up to reality charting and preferences. I want to show everybody that you customize your software using this. There's a couple of items on there that I want to point out. Usually it's these three things: the advanced evidence, the end path text attributes, and the cause options. I'm going to turn off that one so you can see that while you're doing your testing, if I double click on a cause, it automatically just comes up with one. Yeah. If I click on the point here, it shows that there's nothing special about that. So what I'm going to do now is turn on the add cause type. You'll notice that if I add now, I get these two items, add action and condition causes. So if you are interested, you can instantly add an action cause or a condition cause without having to go through anything else. This is not a bad place to be because you can still double click and just add a cause. So it still bypasses that. I have a tendency to use that quite a bit because it adds a lot of causes quickly. So that's what the add cause type option does for you. Recognize that there's no attributes being shown here. So if I click on this button here, you'll notice it puts out some things, notepad, and rules violation radio button telling me that this particular cause has violated 3 rules. And this one has a notes pad attached, but no notes to it. If you've completed your chart, we'll talk about that next one. There will be another icon, which is the solution button. But right now, they'll just show those 2. So that's what the show cause attributes are. I tend to leave it off on mine, but you're welcome to do whichever you wish. Recognize also if I add an end path, whether it be this, more information needed, or a reason for stopping, you can show the end path text. By turning that off, you can just see the stop sign. So recognize that sometimes you may not want to see that, just want to see what it looks like. So those are some of the things that you might want to customize a little bit based on your needs. The rest of them are pretty much standard. I'm not going to get into those at this point in time. Another quick question while we have it showing up here is sometimes people always ask, well, how do I get rid of the stop? And they try to find a place to delete it. The best way is just to add something over the top of it. So my stop is gone now, and then I can add another one. So that's usually the way that we get around that. Other thing I want to point out while we're in this section, just about causes in general, is the colors. You may notice that I have some colors. I'm a big color fan, so I like that. The default is some shade of blue. All you have to do is pick each one of those, and it will have, you have these palette of colors, or you have the standard colors over on the left-hand side. So I do like the colors because I can see if the chart is slanted one way or the other just by color. I also like it for other reasons, but right now that's a big one. I do recommend, if you are in a corporation and are going to see many of the charts, that you probably should have some kind of standard. We're not so big on saying what color you should have, but do make it a standard inside your facility or operations so that everybody's using it the same way, because otherwise you can get thrown off by looking at those. So colors and preferences are the two things I wanted to talk specifically about there. So you can see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and we'll talk more about these issues, but right now I just want to get rid of those and start over again so we get that issue. So we want to know how to add some boxes. We've already seen that. There's a couple of different ways. You can click once and add an action or a condition, and we showed you that. I can double click, which adds a cause. The value in this is that it does not specify action or condition. While you're building your chart, you should probably not be so concerned about that. Just put causes up. There are sections in the manual where we talk about that that says we're more interested in causes at the very beginning. So what we want to do is just keep adding causes. You can add in series by clicking on the end, and I'm double clicking here in case you can't tell. If you want to add one in parallel, we're going to just simply double click. We can add as many as we wish. Just keep adding them. So that's pretty simple to do, very easy. You can also use this icon at the top to create a new cause. You click once, and then it gives you an icon, and you drag it and drop it into the box, and then you can add whichever you wish. When you're moving causes, don't forget that everything is done by the bar, whether it be gray or whatever color it is. So I want to grab this, and once I do, I can move it around. And when you're attaching it, you're going to want to move over. You can see it. If I drop it right now, it will not attach. It may look like it, but it's not. Until you bring that over to the point where it changes color, then it will attach. Now that I've done that, it's attached. You can also, as we mentioned, drag and drop if you want to move causes around. So I can drag this one from here and put it down there. No problem. I can move whole chunks. So I can take this section and bring it up here. Oops, see, it didn't attach until it changes color. There it is. So drag and drop works really well. While you're messing with making your chart, you're probably going to be interested in also how do I delete or get rid of causes. You may say, well, fine, I don't like this cause. Notice the color. Color is kind of a light greenish. I'm kind of colorblind in that range, so it's whatever you call it. But it's not selected yet. You have to click once in the bar. Notice how it just slightly changed. Now when I pull my mouse away, it changes color. Now I have it selected, and I can select multiple ones. So if I go over here and I hit the Shift key and click on the bar, you'll notice I now have two selected. So it's similar to many Microsoft products in that you can select multiple causes independent of each other. And that way from here, if I hit the Delete key, it will then delete the selected causes. My chart looks different. Okay. So looking around there, that is generally just moving causes back and forth, how to get them there, how to select them. There's another way to get causes onto a chart, and I want to talk about that right now. But I do want to, before we start into this section about brainstorming, Susan, would you want to run that the third poll, the one about how they use it?
Sure. Okay, so just launched that now, so hopefully everyone can see that on their screen. If everyone can just take a few seconds here to make your selection. How do you use reality charting during an investigation? Just give a few more seconds here. Got about half the people have voted, so got most people have voted. Just a couple seconds. Okay, let's see what everyone said. So it looks like 41% of people use reality charting with the projector in a room with the team only. 38% they use it to document the work done each day with sticky notes. And 28% use it as a tool to help them organize their thoughts, and just 10% are using it in other ways. And we've got a couple people sharing what those ways are. Some people are saying all of the above. Some people are just saying, to document their initial thoughts. So very good. A little bit of a spread there.
Okay. Good. Then it'll be appropriate. I want to talk about what I want to do is talk about the way sometimes when you get started on a project, one of the ways to there's two ways that you can use this, and both of them are appropriate for the group that's here. I've already preloaded this with some, but I just do want to talk about that. In the holding area, to get a lot of causes onto a chart, and you're building that, this brainstorming area or holding area down at the bottom, hopefully you can see that there's a little tab, like a file folder tab that says holding areas, so I can open and close that as I see fit. You'll notice I've preloaded that with some, and we'll explain why. But there's this little chunk that says brainstorm. I'm going to click on that. Many times it's a very convenient way to grab one out at you, because it does a couple of things. It does not do the noun verb. It will not give you any bing point when it's saying you got characters, etc. So I'm just going to pretend that somebody is telling me something, but just recognize that I can. It will just grab whatever I put and when I do that, I hit the enter key, and boom, it has gone down into the hole. I happen to go right here. So it's a very common way to grab a lot of things quickly as people are yelling at. Actually, I'm going to pretend that we've done that since we don't have all the people in the room. I'm going to close this and recognize that I've pre-built this. We're going to start with a hand bleeding. Some of you who have taken the course might recognize that this is what it's about. Hang on, I see perhaps a question mark. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to click on this and say grab some of these items down here that you'll notice. So if I have a capillary exists, I'm going to drag it up here and see if I can build my chart after I get it done. The reason I've got a hand bleeding is because I have a capillary and a blood pressure. I've got the capillary, blood pressure, capillary exists because hand bleeding, sorry. I've got the severed capillary because the capillary exists, so you move things around until it makes sense to you. I've got blood pressure because the heart was pumping and there was resistance. So you can just grab these, and I've got the severed capillary because I got a capillary, I got a sharp knife, relative contact, adequate force, and I've got relative contact because my hand was in the way, knife moving. So when you're building a chart, you can see how quickly I was able to do that. This particular one here is that sample that I did. I'm going to empty that. So if you have leftovers that you don't want, you can easily empty. It'll give you a warning. The collect, some people may not have used that. The collect one, what it will do is if I have unconnected causes somewhere on the chart. As you can see, I put this one in here and it says I don't know where it is. Now, it may seem like that's weird, but recognize that it could look like this. Here's a cause all by itself. You don't know where it is. You might be working way over here and not even know it's there, and it starts giving you trouble. So at one point in time, if you find that, you may want to hit collect, and notice how it just drags everything off there and cleans up your chart for you. And then you can empty it if it's something you don't need. Okay, so now that we've got a chart built, as you can tell, we're going to do those kinds of things. The holding branch area is great for that. The other option I wanted to point out is, as you can see, if you happen to use this with documenting at the end of each day, what I just did is probably the simplest way to get a large chart off the wall. It's best if worked with two people, but basically somebody reads from the far right, reads each cause in some form. Usually I ask them to read it in a branch format and then go back and start another branch. But they read them and you type them, put them into the holding area, and then all you have to do is look up and drag them in there just like you saw me do. So documenting a chart that you've done for the day is relatively easy when you go through that process. So you can capture new causes that are at the very beginning, or you can use it to document, and I find that to be very valuable when I'm doing facilitation, and I may have used stickies at the start and have a big chart. Now I got to figure out how to get it into the system, so I have found that that is the fastest and easiest way to do that. Recognize that as you're building your chart, you're going to want to eventually put in what you think something is. So if I click this as an action, you'll notice mine has got color on it, so it changes color. The resistance to flow is a condition because it's existed over time. So as you go through that, you would add those and all of the other items with evidence, etc. We're going to talk about evidence a little later.
Hey, Kevin.
Now, one of the things that you might be...
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to alert you. David has a question here that's timely. Collect only gathers those causes not tied?
That is correct. The collect only gathers ones that are not tied to something else. So if one of the ways you could use that is it finds uncollected causes that just got disconnected over the time, or you could, theoretically, you could just say, well, I want to collect these, but I want to find an easy way to do it, so I could drag this chunk here. If I drag it and disconnect it, it would then collect that if I did it. So there's a couple of different ways you can use it in that respect. Okay. What I wanted to show you was the way the system works if you need to, is that if you drag a chunk here down into the holding area while you're building a chart, it will come up and says it's connected. Would you like to preserve the relationship or disconnect it? So if I disconnect it, each of these will become 3 separate causes, but many times you're going to say, no, that path is okay, I just don't like where it is. So I would probably preserve it, and that will make my point here, is that when you're doing that, you'll notice that I have multiple colors here. Okay, so I've got a couple like that, and let's say I have this severed. If I bring this one down in here, do the same thing, preserve it. You'll notice how I've got a couple of issues here. I've got a white with gray after it, white with gray after it. So you can ID the fact that there are things connected via those colors. So if I want to bring this up, it's going to bring that whole thing up. But I recognize that the first white one is the one in my series, and everything flows from the back. So I can bring that whole thing back up again. And you'll see how it's there. And then I've still left this one here. So that the color in there is important to recognize that it's identifying in your holding area what's going on. And this was relative contact goes there, yeah. Okay. Inserting, one of the things that some people have used and need to use, always good question, is how do I put a cause in the middle somewhere? So if I want to add a cause, notice that if I click on this button here, it's context sensitive. It's context sensitive, so if I click here, I get 5 items. But if I click over here, I get more items. One of them is this OR logic, and I get this insert causes. So sometimes you say, well, I want to put a cause right from here, somewhere in between. A lot of times it's right in series, but you get this option. So if I click on insert, I'm going to get a list of causes, and notice how those are the ones that are listed right here. Capillary, sharp knife, adequate force, and relative contact. So what it's telling me is you can put this between severed capillary and adequate force only if you wish, or I can put it between all of them or just some of them. So you get to choose where you want to put that. And there are cases where you might want to do both. I'm going to assume that we're going to insert it between all of them. So if you don't, you unclick those, but if you do, you just hit submit, and it will insert it between all of them. So there's my new cause. A caution. When we talk about, I was going to talk about undo later, but this is a good time to make sure you recognize that. And that is one of the issues that the undo feature will not undo. So if I click undo, it didn't take that one away. It actually got rid of a one previously from that. I want to put that back in. So you can see how it gets a little messy. The undo feature doesn't work very well with the insert cause. So be aware of that before you insert causes. It can make some difficulties for you. While we're talking about inserting causes, moving causes around, one of the things that you might be interested in also is, you may have seen it, may not, is the fact that you can cut and paste and copy. I don't use it that much, and I'll show you why, but it does exist. So if I want to copy this cause, the first thing I have to do is select it. When I go up to the edit, you'll notice those grayed out features now become available. So I've got a copy and a cut and a paste, etc. So if I want to copy this cause that I've selected, capillary exists, I can now paste that onto my site. Now, you don't get to choose where, unfortunately. That's one of the issues with this. But if I go back here to edit and paste, it will come up and tell you what it's done. Has been placed near the primary effect. It's less than suitable method. If it's less, you may want to do something different. The implement tag has been removed from any solutions associated with the cause. So I'm going to say OK. That doesn't look like it's near the primary effect, does it? I don't know why that is. As you can tell, it's not perfect, but this one pasted out somewhere. It's supposed to be near my primary effect. It usually shows up right next to that one. But now that I have a copy of that, I can add it to something if I wish. And you can do that. So you do have the cut and paste options. One of the things that you might want to do, again, we're just still adding causes to a chart. I'm going to get rid of that one. One of the things you might want to do if you've done these things before is recognize that you may have a chart that says, gee, I already developed a failed bearing before, or an injured shoulder, or something else. So you say, I already did that on other charts. Too bad I can't get that off of that chart onto this one. Well, you can. So another way to add causes to a chart would be to grab them from another chart. So I'm going to show you how that works. So you can see I've got two charts open right here, not open, but available. I'm going to minimize this one, and you'll see the other one pops up behind there, but I'm going to minimize that one too, so you can see I have two. I've got two charts right here, and I want to add some causes to my chart. So if I click on this one here and drag it over to this and drop it, you'll notice how this one is still the original one, so I'm going to close that one down. Minimize it. Go over to this one. Here's the one that we were started with, heart pumping, door stuck. You'll notice that I look at all the causes I just added to my chart. Bunch of them. Door struck shoulder. So I have just added a ton of causes to my chart with all of the other things that are necessary, that came with it too, so you have to be careful about that. But recognize that you can cut and paste between different charts, different chunks. Theoretically, you could even have small charts that you have that say, hey, for bearings, I have these bearing ones. I have safety ones. You can have all sorts of little charts that you use to pull off sections if you want to build a chart faster. So be aware that that's another way to add causes onto your chart. Currently, let's see. I'm going to leave this one open because I want to talk about hiding and showing. I'm going to show you a couple things here. You can select an individual cause by clicking once on the bar. As you've seen, that's highlighted now. But you can also select multiple things. So anything past here, if I double click on that, you'll notice that I just selected a whole chunk. All that stuff that I just added, I just selected. So now if I go up to Tools, Hide and Show, Hide Selected Causes, you'll notice that if you go there before, it won't do anything because you haven't had any selected. So if I hide that, now you'll notice that all of a sudden it looks like my chart's disappeared. I can always find my starting point by hitting the primary effect, and you'll notice it replaces it with hidden causes. Many times you may want to simplify your chart, so you might want to just hide or show some of those items just like that. Be aware also that I can do this. I'm gonna unhide those causes. You go back to the same place. Gonna expand all the causes, and that will bring them back into point of view. Also recognize, as I showed you, you can individually select causes, so you may want to do the same kind of thing. I can select that one. I'm going to hit the Shift that, select multiple causes, and then I'm going to, I see I might have another question here. Let's see. Show answer. I get this icon, but I don't see anything about what it is.
Okay, Kevin. Yeah, I was gonna interrupt you. There's a good question here. Can you just bring one item from an older chart and pull into the newer one?
Item. If you mean one cause, the answer is yes. I did the selection. Might as well just go ahead and show that. So let's go ahead and do that again, so you can see that you can pick just one. I'm going to bring both of them up. I selected a whole string by doing that, so I'm going to click outside of this. I'm going to bring just this one cause, which is shoulder and path. Ooh. No, yeah, shoulder and path. So I click and select it. But I only clicked once. I've only selected that one cause, not a bunch. So now, if I drag that one over, it will just have should have just the one cause. Unfortunately, it's a little small, so I'm having difficulty seeing that, but it should have just brought the one cause over. So, yes, you should be able to do that. Okay, so I see sorry. I'll rely on you, Susan, to remind me because I don't see all of them. You may see that some causes in there. Okay. So let's go back to our heart pumping. This is ours. I showed you how to hide and unhide some causes if you need to. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to hide those. Actually, no. What I wanted to do was this. I wanted to show you that if I try to hide something without a cause selected, I get this please select causes. So it will continue to remind you that you got some issues that need to be dealt with. So that just means I need to go over and select something so that I can hide it.
Hey, Kevin, we've just got a question here from Ben that's timely as well. So he asks, rather than hide causes, is there a way to mark a cause or cause path with an X or something else when you have ruled it out a cause or a cause path due to evidence? So he'd like to leave the causes in the chart, but wants to remember that these causes were considered and ruled out.
I am not aware. I'm not aware of a visual methodology except by color. So, if I was asked to do that at a client's site, I would say, fine. I'm going to pick a color that I use for that. Let me show these. Sorry. Let me show all the expand on causes. Let's say this is one. I just don't want you to see this one, or I want you to recognize that it's not part of that. I can just come in here. Oops. It's selected. I'm going to change the color to something else. So you could use a color to identify it as that way. However, I will also mention a caution. Theoretically, what I always recommend to clients is that if they have disproved a cause and it's not part of the causal element, I usually recommend to actually remove it, because it really is just going to mess up. It's going to mess up your actual analysis, because I always say it's very good at determining what did happen but not what could happen. So if you leave it on there, it's about what could happen, and that's a different methodology. It's more like fault tree analysis, etc. So be aware of that aspect too, but I think you could use the color to deal with it if you wished. But there's no way that I'm aware of to make an X. One of the other things that we should point out is that this other tool, there's another way to select causes. If I use the lasso tool up here, I can highlight a bunch of causes. So you'll see that what it's done is just highlight specific ones. So it's like any other one that squares, they just call it lasso tool. So now I can hide those. I can change the color. I can do whatever I wish on that. So another methodology for selecting. And if you just click outside that, it will eliminate those. I wanted to mention about evidence. I believe right now the evidence, if I click here, you'll notice that it does not do anything except allow me to type in there, which is fine. However, be aware that if I'm misspelling words, etc., I can have some issues if I'm trying to find evidence, all sorts of things like that. So my recommendation is that you turn on the advanced evidence while you're doing your chart, and that would be under Tools, Evidence. And this is you can preset this in the preferences at the beginning where I showed you. But I'm going to turn on the advanced mode so that everybody knows now. If I select, and here's one. Here's one where I select, if I click in evidence with a question mark, you'll notice it brings up a list. This list is customizable. You can see I've added a few. You can add your own. I was just at a client called Schlumberger, and so we put that in there to show them how it works. But recognize I don't have to do as much typing, and observations are a very common one, so I'll list that there. So you can see how I can just click and grab on evidence. It's very good. Now, if you have to put a lot of evidence in, and that's a standard for me, I do a lot of causes and I leave the evidence till later. If you have to do a lot of causes, some people might run through the rules check, which we'll talk about the next one. But my suggestion is, if you're going to put a lot of evidence in, I find that the simplest way is just to start on a branch and just use the advanced evidence and click, select, go to the next one, click, select, click, select. I can put a lot of evidence in very quickly, and it usually matches up with a branch. We'll have a very specific kind of evidence that's normal to it, or maybe it's a similar report, etc., things like that. So when you're adding a lot of evidence in a row, you might want to use a manual method as opposed to the rules check. If you're going to delete causes, that's fine. I showed you how to do that. Select it and delete it. Seems relatively easy. I'll do that. Boom, it's gone. You'll notice how it switches the chart around, which can be a problem. What I was going to say was, if you delete a cause that has other causes behind it, that sometimes can make it very difficult to put the item back. If I want to get rid of this, but I just want to move these others back to it, I find the simplest thing to do is to grab it and move it ahead of time. So I'm going to delete screws loosened. So I'm moving that first, and then this one that was behind it, I'm going to move that up here. And then I'm going to find screws loosened, which is now, and then I'm going to delete it. So a little thinking ahead of time sometimes is a good way to make sure that you don't lose your place in the whole chart. Recognize there's many ways when you're building your chart to sort around in Reality. So we're going to go up to View, Sort. There's a couple of things you may or may not. If I want to, I can hit Actions. What that will do would be sort so that all of the actions, if they exist, go on the top. You'll notice there we go, action, 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 action. So that's one way to do it. You can also sort by longest path. Sometimes that might be of some value. I personally have not used that very often, but I do know it exists. You also may wish to sort by root causes. I don't have any on this. I don't have any on this. Well, let's see. Maybe I do. Actually, I think I do have on here. Did have some, but the problem with that is it sorts them so they're at the top. So you only have to look at the top, but it still doesn't find them for you or put them out separate. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure when you might want to use that. Every once in a while, people have a need to have them in a specific order. So you'll notice that removed is at the bottom. The causes go in the order that you put them in. So I can rearrange these by putting them in at a different level. Right now, the last one in, so if I take this screws never installed and I go like this, screws never installed, if I add that to this one here, it should go to the bottom. So you can rearrange the causes if you have a need. Some people are very picky about that. They want it on the top. So fine, you can do that. You have to pull them off and put them in a specific order, and they will stay in that order unless you resort them. Another methodology or item here that you may be aware of or may not be aware of is the find. So if I'm looking for a particular cause, as you start typing, you'll notice I've typed shoulder, and it comes up with all these items in here. Shoulder and path might be the one I'm looking for. As with all of the reality charting, it always moves it to what they call center left. So always look for anything when you go submit, find, look for, click on the cause, any of those. It will always put it center left so you can find it and then deal with it as best you can, or whatever it is you want to do. So I can look for anything. Except that if you're looking for a root cause, I don't know if there are any on this, but I did find out the other day that you can type in root cause and it still won't find it. So you have to go look for them. There's ways around that. We'll talk about that in the next one. But you can't search for a root cause. It's looking for what's inside the cause box. So if I typed injury, there isn't one. And bleeding, knife moving. That's because it's not looking for the whole word. It's looking for the IN. As you notice, it found it in there.
Hey, Kevin. So I just wanted to
let's see. I'm looking at.
Sorry, Kevin. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up, 5-minute warning here. If you've got any questions that you've thought of during the webinar, you might want to start sending those through now. We'll go ahead and we'll let Kevin finish off here, and then we can start going through some of your questions if anyone has any. So start sending those through, and we'll just let Kevin, continue on, and then we'll get to those questions afterwards.
Excellent. Perfect time. I got just a couple little things I was going to mention, and then we were going to kick into there. I wanted to point out that if you have the icons turned on, and I'm just to refresh everybody's memory, I'm going to go turn those on. I'm going to go back to preferences. I am going to show cause attributes, and you'll notice that they show up now. This can be a very handy feature here, this notes. Let's say you're putting causes on there, and somebody in the team or somebody says, oh, we ought to remember about this one, or there's a special note or whatever. So if I just click on that, I have now added notes feature. And if I add that, I can close this down, but notice how it now shows up here. So I have added a note to that particular cause, and I've put it on that particular cause so I can always find it. You can always go up to the view and look for the notes, and you'll see where it has associated causes here. So if I have test the notes feature, if I click on this, associated causes, it should put it center left as it did, and you can always find it. So as you go through your notes, you can add standard notes that are not linked to causes, just general notes about the analysis, or you can tie them to a particular cause. I find that to be a very valuable feature. The last items I want to talk about is also on the action item. Again, when you're building your chart, one thing you want to be aware of is that I should have a bunch of actions here. The reports, the action item report will come up here, and you'll notice that I have a lot of items here. These will be showing you the question marks. What it's looking for is if it says find evidence, it will be looking for a question mark here. I should be able to click on this, and it takes me left, so I got blood pressure. It says I don't have any evidence for blood pressure. Fine. And if I have one that says find out why, so I'll click on that one. Center left, 6-foot elevation. So it's saying that, are you sure that's an issue? So it always finds these question marks. So I want to make sure you recognize that chart when you're building it. That's what it's looking for, and you're trying to eliminate that. The other thing I want to point out with the action item list is an action item list is a list of actions to do, and there's some of them inside the chart, but there's also some outside the chart. So if I just want to say, discuss cost of solutions with manager, if I hit add action item, it added that right at the bottom there. Now I should assign an owner and a date, but recognize it's not tied to anything, and it does have an X there, so I can get rid of that. So I can delete it eventually if I do solve it, but this can be and should be your single point of action item list for when you're building a chart, so that you can always remember all those things. You don't have to have separate pieces of paper, separate notes, separate anything. So that's a handy way, and you can always print this out and export. Talk about some of those features in the next one. This was more about just building the chart. That covers most of the features that I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to talk to, Susan. So if we have some questions.
We don't have any new questions at the moment, Kevin, so you must have covered everything perfectly. Well done.
Oh, yes.
So I guess if no one else has a question, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today. We've gone through a lot of information. We hope you found it all helpful.
I would like to, let's go ahead before we finish off then, if that's the case. Let's run the last poll, which is about the sticky note use.
Yeah, okay, let's do it. So I'll just launch that now. All right, so everyone should be able to see this last poll question. How do you use sticky notes in an investigation? On the first day only, throughout the investigation, or does it depend on the situation? I'll just give you a few seconds here to make your choice. All right, still have a few votes coming through, so just a couple seconds here. Okay, looks like for most people it depends on the situation.
Yeah, good. Okay, so that just means we're still using sticky notes. I still find that to be valuable myself because of the common reality that it generates, so it's good to see that is still part of the way they do business. So thank you for that information. And I see a question mark popping up on my item. Is there a new question popping up?
No, not really. Not so much a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, someone commented that they don't really use sticky notes, so that's interesting.
And that is the wave of the future. From what we gather, is they're trying to move in that direction. I personally have done one where I did not use sticky notes because there was no wall space at all. And it worked okay. There was a couple of comments where you couldn't see the whole thing, and everybody was concerned about that, but we managed through there. So it can be done, has been done, and as others have said, is being done. So good for that.
All right, so we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thanks so much for attending. I will be sending out a recording of the webinar to everyone who registered, so you look out for that next week. Just a reminder, our next webinar is going to be Thursday, September 5th, and we're going to cover many of the features you can use in reality charting after your reality chart has been built. So we'll sort of pick it up where we left off today. As mentioned at the start, we'll also show you some of the features in the RC Pro Enterprise software as well. Just remember, for more information about reality charting or Apollo RCA, you can visit apollorootcause.com. When you exit the webinar today, you'll be presented with a couple quick questions asking for your feedback on this webinar, so we'd really appreciate your input there. Thank you again, Kevin, for doing an excellent job presenting, and thank you again to everyone for attending. We look forward to having you at our next webinar.